Alright everyone, well, it's been a while since I did some cool animation stuff using Photoshop CS3 Extended, so here we go. What we're going to be doing is creating a really cool animated background, but what's really cool about it is that it's going to have kind of a three-dimensional feel to it. It's really very cool, and I think it's going to, once you see how simple it is, all kinds of different kind of creative possibilities open up. So this just kind of is like a springboard, but I encourage you, once you see this, to go out and try your own different types of experiments and see what kind of cool things you can come up with. But here we have a regular document, and we're going to do this against a color background. Obviously, I don't want to do it against a white background. That's not very interesting. So let's go ahead and give us a color. Go ahead and pull up my color picker here, and I'm just going to give it kind of a blue color. We'll Option Delete, and that'll fill the background layer in. And now I need to create the pattern that I'm going to animate over this background. Well, I'm going to do that by first creating a new file. I'm going to go into the File menu, go to New, and we're going to make a very small document here. We're going to make it 100 pixels by 100 pixels at 100 dpi. Everything looks good. Let's make that. And got a very small document there. Well, I'm going to go ahead and create a new blank layer here, and I'm going to go get the elliptical marquee tool here. I'm going to hold the Shift key down and just draw a circle right inside there. And I'm just going to, since black, or rather white, is in my background swatch here, I'm just going to press Command Delete, that would be Control Backspace, on a Windows machine to fill that background swatch into the selected area. Now we don't see a change, obviously, because the background is white as well. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and turn off that background layer and go ahead and deselect, and all we see is our circle, our white circle. Well, I'm going to do a Select All. Go into the Select menu and choose All, or simply press Command or Control A, and I'm going to align that shape inside of this document. Let's click this middle icon here in the options bar and the top one here, and that'll center that shape in there. Well, now what I'm going to do is making sure this background layer is off because we want to get that transparency. I'm going to go into the Edit menu and choose Define Pattern. And we'll click OK, and I don't necessarily need this document anymore, so let's close it. Don't save. Now we're back in our original file. What I'm going to do now is create a new blank layer, and I'm going to press Shift Delete to open up the Fill dialog here. We're going to use 50% gray, click OK, and now we're going to apply a layer style to this. We're going to actually animate the layer style. Yes, you can actually do that. So let's first apply the layer style. I'm going to double click on that layer, or you can simply go into the Effects menu and we're going to choose Pattern Overlay here. And inside the Pattern menu, we're going to find that circle that we just defined as a pattern. So select it. It should be the very last shape in there. So once I select it, you can see it applies it inside of our image. But it's very big. And this is the beauty of applying a pattern as a layer style, because you can scale it. So I'm actually going to take the scale to about 50%. That's going to fill more of that area in, and I can actually move my window out of the way, but while still keeping it open, the layer styles window, move it out of the way. You can actually go in here and move the pattern around manually. So I'm just going to kind of center that in place there, and then I'm going to click OK. Now, I'm going to open up my animation panel. Let's go under the window and choose Animation, and here we get our animation panel. Now I'm going to start the animation at the very beginning. Notice play was way over here. We're going to bring it to the very beginning, and we're going to twirl down. We're on this pattern layer, which is layer 2 right here. We're going to twirl this down to reveal the various properties we can animate, and in this case we want to animate the style, which is the layer style. So I'm going to go ahead and drop a keyframe there by clicking on the stopwatch. At the beginning, let's take the playhead and move it all the way to the end of our sequence here, which is set to 10 seconds. So the playhead's at the very end there. Now I'm going to go back into that layer style. Let's double click on that effects icon on that particular layer, go into the pattern overlay, and I'm going to go and move this layer style window out of the way. I'm going to go in here and just hold down the Shift key and just move this to the left. In fact, I'm going to do that a couple times, or a few times rather. And then click OK. Notice what happens in the timeline. It automatically dropped a new keyframe in there. Now if I go and toggle through here, you can see that the pattern is now moving across my document. Very cool stuff. Now, here's the problem. There's that blue background back there, but we see nothing but the gray background, because that's what we filled the layer with, is that gray. Well, I don't want to see the gray. I just want to see those white dots. Well, all I need to do is simply take the fill setting here and just toggle that down to 0. So now the dots are visible, but the background is. Now, notice what's happening. It's fading back in there. Why? Because we made a keyframe there. We changed the property of that layer. In fact, the layer style. So let's go back and undo that and toggle back over that first keyframe. Let's go into the layer style, and you can do the very same thing. I just did it in the layers panel over here, but inside the layer styles window, you go into the blending options, and here is that same thing, that same fill opacity. Let's take that and drop it down to 0. Click OK. Now, it did it at this keyframe, but let's toggle through. Notice it's going to go back to the gray. Notice there, as we get closer to this keyframe. So we got to change the property of that keyframe too. Let's go into the layer style, blending options, fill opacity down to 0. So it probably would have saved me time to go ahead and drop that fill opacity down when I was doing the animation by generating the initial keyframes. However, it's good that that happened, so you know that when you have to change a property on a timeline, chances are you're going to have to go to every keyframe and change that property again. You can also drag and select keyframes. Yellow indicates it is selected, gray means it's not selected. So you can drag and select multiple keyframes in your timeline. Anyway, back to the animation. So we've got the animation, we can see the blue background, everything looks pretty good. Well, now what I want to do is I'm going to contain this into a smart object. I'm going to go ahead and hold down my control key, and let's go to the flyout menu here. We're going to choose Convert to Smart Object. So nothing's really different. It's just the way it's presented in the layers panel here. Everything looks good. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit here. I'm going to press Command or Control T to bring up the free transform, and I'm going to control or right click directly on that, and we're going to go and select Warp. Now here's where you can go just crazy with this. In fact, what I'm going to do is just grab inside the grid here, right about here, and just going to push this down. Maybe take this outer area and push it out, and maybe grab these handles and just go crazy. I mean, you can do all kinds of really weird stuff here. Just like that. So I'm just not going to spend too much time with that, but I think you get the idea, because Warp gives you the freedom to really just manipulate it in any direction you want. So once I'm done, I'm going to press Enter. Now when I toggle through here, you can notice that it's animating through. Now it's a little jumpy because it isn't fully rendered, and you're not really getting the best representation yet, but when we render this in just a minute, you'll see. But what I want to do is a couple more things here. I want to first change the blend mode of this layer. I don't want it to be pure white on the blue background. So I'm going to go over here and change my blend mode of this layer to overlay. Gives a little bit more interest in there. I'm going to add a little bit more interest by putting a layer mask on this layer. Let's drop in a layer mask there, grab my gradient tool, and of course using the foreground to transparent with black set as the foreground color, we're just going to mask some of the outer edges of this just so it's not so harsh around here. So on that layer mask, let's come in from maybe the sides here, a little bit from the bottom. Gives that a little bit of kind of edginess to it. So there's that. What I'm going to do now, just so you can see what's going on here, I'm going to narrow my work area just by grabbing these handles, and what this does is it narrows the area you're gonna render out so you can get a quick preview. So I'm gonna narrow that area in and simply hit the space bar, and it's going to render these frames out. It may take a minute depending on the speed of your machine. Now animation does look a little jumpy right now because it's rendering each frame. Notice this little green line, that means it's a rendered frame. So once it gets to the end, it will play smoothly, and notice what happens. You're gonna see a huge difference, and it's just gonna look really, really cool. So you can see it's really kind of flowing through and has kind of a dimensional quality about it. It's just kind of like going around the shape, you know, but all we did was warp it. We just simply warped it, and it has that illusion of 3D. So let's do this. Let me add just a final element here. A little bit of animation or a little bit of background element that I threw in here. Here's the problem though. So notice the background showing through that image. All I need to do, as you can see in the layers panel here, it's just a photo that's clipped inside of a shape layer. So it's only clipped in there, but I need to mask part of this background so we can see the photo. So I'm going to actually load that shape layer as a selection. I'm going to Command or Control click directly on it. And notice it loads it as a selection. Simply select the layer mask of that animated layer and then just fill it with black. I'm going to press Option Delete. Fills that layer in, or that layer mask in, so we can see the image. And again, let's render this and see what we get. Hitting that space bar, it'll start to render the frames through. And as you can see, background's animating. We can see the foreground. We've got a little bit of a fade in here. Everything looks cool. And we did that entirely inside Photoshop using some very, very simple tools. So, as I mentioned before, experiment with yourself. Try different shapes, try different patterns, see what kind of cool things you come up with, and have fun.